Thank you, Addis. Yeah, like my latest appearance on Al Jazeera Arabic was a heated debate on three scenarios. The program itself is called Scenarios, which is produced by a very popular Al Jazeera journalist. And we were given actually 3 points to debate on. And the first scenario we were given was about the impoundment of the dam, the filling processes, and the issues related to the second filling. And the second scenario was on whether or not Egypt and Sudan would take the AU-led negotiation to the United Nations Security Council and the consequences thereof. And the third scenario was walking out of the Declaration of Principles. The Declaration of Principles, as you know, was signed in 2015 by the heads of states of the three countries. And the scenario speaks more on whether they quit the African-led Union negotiation, which was founded on the Declaration of Principles, and what the consequences would be. And the last was the way forward. So we were four discussants. The first one was Hani Ruslan from the Al Haram Center for Strategic Studies.
William Davison.
William Davison from the Crisis International, and the Sudanese lawyer who has experience in dealing with GERD issues, and myself. So they were representing the views of their governments, and I was neutral in this position. But I was promoting also the idea of my country.
Were you assigned by Ethiopian government, or
no? This was like a personal appearance. But like the Ethiopian government and the Ethiopian people have all similar says when it comes to the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. So I do share that sentiment as well. So I was appearing there representing myself, and you could say representing the opinions of my people in the country. So it was a very heated debate. A number of issues were raised, and finally we have the truth, of course.
do you think you hit the nail on the head?
I would think so. Yeah, the evaluations and the assessments that came out of the program after it was completed,
After it was aired?
Yeah, it was very clear, and yeah, of course, we had the truth, and then that was communicated very clear and candidly, and I think we made good points there.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay, this GERD and obviously the Nile River is a bone of contention, as I have said a while ago, between Sudan, Egypt, and Ethiopia.
Yeah.
What is the main reason? Can you, explain that?
Yeah, it's about the power play. Egypt is a very strong strategic partner in the North African and in the Middle East, and the West uses as a gate to meddle into the politics, the economics, and everything that relates to regional issues in the Middle East and in the Northern Africa. So it has support from the West, the Arabs, and is a very good tool to manipulate the Arab League. And Ethiopia, on the other hand, is also a very strong partner to the West in terms of counter-terrorism operations, in terms of
geopolitics.
Yeah, geopolitically, in terms of peacekeeping, in terms of regulating issues related to particularly terrorism and security in the Middle East and in Africa as well. So there is a power play. It's natural. There has always been a power play between the two countries. But when it comes to the utilization of the Nile or the Abai River, Egypt has the upper hand, and Egypt and Sudan particularly have benefited and exploited the water largely. And there are investments which they have attracted from mainly the Arab leagues and the Gulf states.
So far.
Yeah, so far. Yeah, so now in the beginning, they were very sure that Ethiopia would.
Look, that was my question.
Yeah.
Look, the development of the GERD has scored 10 years, right?
Yeah.
At the 11th hour, Egypt and Sudan are complaining about this development, particularly on the filling and operation of this project. You see why they kept quiet at the early stage since its establishment and started yelling at the 11th hour.
That accusation to me is so baseless, and mainly it relates to a potential formation of new Nile world order. You know, Egypt has had the upper hand so far since BC. It has been using the water to develop the dry lands, the sands, the deserts through irrigation, using the sands and the silt from the Abai River. And they have built a tremendous and strong economy over the centuries, and they don't want to lose that, right? So with the completion of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, Ethiopia would register a higher economic growth and would advance to appear and come out as a very strong political ally to the West and to the East in the Northern Africa and in the Middle East. And that also requires countries in the Gulf who has invested a lot in agriculture and infrastructure of irrigation-based facilities to relocate their investments accordingly with the new coming change in the hydropolitical order in the region. So there is a fear from the Egyptian side that they would lose politically their hegemony of control in the Nile Basin and in the greater Middle East and North African region. And that's why now they are trying their best to impede the process of the filling, the process of the construction of the dam, because of what I have been mentioning about. So the accusations are baseless, as I've said, because even if we take the declaration of principles that they have signed in 2015 by the three heads of states in Khartoum, in the principle 5, it was clearly indicated about the first filling of the GERD, and that filling is in tandem with, or it goes on parallelly with the construction of the dam. So once the first filling is set, the subsequent fillings would continue accordingly. And it was also agreed by 15 experts. It's called the National Independent Scientific Research Group. It's a group of scientists, 5 scientists from each country, totally 15, which have developed the stage-based filling process that we know. Last year we did the first filling, right?
Exactly.
4.9 billion cubic meters.
Last summer.
Yeah, last summer. And this summer we're going to
do
add 13.5. It will continue accordingly until the completion of the dam. And that was not Ethiopia's unilateral
Would filling
action.
these reservoirs decrease the usual water potential or amount that goes to Egypt?
We are, in order to reduce the risks that would come as a result of filling this big reservoir, Ethiopia has chosen to conduct the filling of the dam, the impoundment of the dam in summer when we have plenty of rain, right? So we are filling the reservoir from the extra water that we receive from the summer rainfall, right? So, for example, if we take the first filling, that was only 7% of the average Nile inflow into the system. Yeah. And the second filling, which we are going to conduct in July, is only about 17.5% of the average inflow of the Nile, and it happens when there is an excess of water. And that doesn't have created any problem so far. Like Egypt in Kinshasa, in the last rounds of the trilateral negotiations, have been mentioning about shortage of water and the drought that was caused last year due to Ethiopia's filling of the dam, which is completely baseless because they have been receiving 90 million cubic meters of water every day. And even today, as we speak, from the opening of the 2 bottom outlets of the dam, they have been receiving 712 cubic meter per second in April. And this amount of water, the sum total of the daily amount of water that joins the Nile river course is way beyond the average that it received for this particular season.
Could we say that Egypt wouldn't lose any drop of water from the usual flow?
They are gaining and benefiting actually from a regular controlled flow of water that doesn't cause flooding, that doesn't harm the life of the dams, but that ensures a continuous supply of water to both Sudan and Egypt.
Appreciate it, Doctor. Look, this river, the Nile River, crosses 11 countries through courses of its journey.
Yeah.
But it is the question of only three countries. It's the burning issue for Sudan, Egypt, and Ethiopia only. What about the rest 8 countries?
I think that's not in the interest of Ethiopia, as far as I know. That has become a question of the 3 countries, particularly, which is reflected in the trilateral negotiations, is a push from Egypt and Sudan. You know, Egypt and Sudan in 1959, in their agreements of sharing the waters of the Nile River, have agreed to exclude the rest of the upper riparian countries, which were the source of the water, and they've agreed to use the water exclusively for themselves, leaving a small portion for evapotranspiration. And discussions has been ongoing since particularly the 1999, when the Nile Basin Initiative was established, which led to the Cooperative Framework of Agreement, which was trying actually to bring together all the riparian countries, the 11 countries that you've mentioned, to sit together and develop a framework of agreement that ensures collective development of the waters of the Nile, and then a fair share and equitable share of the resources and the outputs from whatever development is being conducted on the course of the river. But Sudan and Egypt declined the agreement because they said it will affect their historical water sharing rights, and that's completely nonsense. You know, which water are we talking about? Ethiopia is asking its fair share. You know, as a country that produces about 85–86% of the waters of the Nile.
Originates.
Yeah, producing that amount of much water, including other countries who also supplement to that. Egypt and Sudan having no and less contributions, but just benefiting from the resources, they cannot exclude the rest of the countries. They cannot ignore the questions for developing and advancing infrastructures on water by the other riparian countries to uplift millions of peoples out of poverty and darkness. So they were denying this, so they couldn't be a party to those agreements. They put a precondition that all the Nile Basin countries should first agree on respecting their historical water rights shares, which gives and leaves nothing to all the riparian countries. So that history actually dates back to that agreement.
What are those drawbacks and shortcomings of a colonial treaty that Egypt is claiming as its right?
Very clear, you know, that treaty has ignored the interests of sovereign interests and demands for a fair share of water that they produced in their lands. It completely requires every country not to raise any issue related to a fair share. Because, you know, like the 1959 agreement has apportionated the amount of water in the Nile into 3 categories. The first category is a category that provides a huge amount of water for Egypt use. And the second is for Sudan's use. And the rest and a few amount is left for evapotranspiration. And then where is the fair share?
There is no room
where is the share of the other countries? Like countries like Ethiopia, which are contributing the majority of the water. So that was built on that premises. And that premises would open no room for any form of negotiation.
Vehemently ignored other countries.
Yeah, so that was not fair. So those colonial treaties are unacceptable in any form.
Can we know the exact side or thought of Egypt this time?
They have so far been pushing an agenda, or they have so far been pushing the Ethiopia to sign in a binding agreement that respects this particular agreement. But Ethiopia cannot sign any agreement on this regard because it denies its right and interest to develop the Nile River to its benefit, and actually to the benefit of other countries also in the upper right.
Exactly. The Ethiopian government is pushing forward on developing the GERD without giving hand for its traits and other veto powers. How do you say this?
True.
Even
It also,
America has involved
yeah.
other giant countries. We can mention Israel
Yeah.
and other Arab countries in considering Ethiopia as a threat, and as if Ethiopia is violating Egyptians and Sudan's right. But the government is pushing forward in developing and maintaining its own right and its citizens' proper opportunities in which the Nile going to be utilized.
Yeah, it ties very well with Ethiopia's strong commitment to international cooperation, the cooperation that starts from its neighbors. You know, Ethiopia has always been a staunch supporter of multinationalism and international cooperation. It has been a vanguard of international peace and security, and that's very much reflected in our involvement in peacekeeping missions, in stabilizing missions, not only in Africa and even beyond. And they all tie to that. And again, Ethiopia has been pushing an agenda that believes in the fact that African problems should be addressed through African themselves. So because we have solutions, we have to exploit the wisdom of Africans, African negotiation skills, and bring it to in the mediation room so that Egypt, Sudan, and the remaining countries, including Ethiopia, also take their benefits properly in a manner that doesn't affect others. But Sudan and Egypt, on the contrary, have been hell-bent on making the AU-led processes to fail. You know, over the past 6 years since the signing of the Declaration of Principles, they have withdrawn, they have declined a number of the negotiation processes. They have been in and out of that processes, and they have been also ignoring the power of the African Union designated team of experts to support a negotiation. They've been drafting a very good document, but they have declined. Particularly, Egypt has declined. Sudan has agreed in the beginning, but later the politicians have declined on agreeing to that terms. So there is a lot of politics going on there.
What is America's business in this guard politics? America is always yelling in favor of Egypt and Sudan. In the meantime, putting pressure on the Ethiopian government regarding the Tigray operation. What is the interest of America in Eastern African politics?
There a lot can be said on that regard, as I have been mentioning earlier also. You know, Egypt as a strategic partner of the U.S. in the Middle East and in Northeastern Africa has a lot of bargaining influence in the affairs of the Gulf states and in helping American interests be maintained through its role in the Arab League. That's one. So, and it has been actually, as you know, a recipient of huge military aid. It has been a recipient of humanitarian aid, and those all add up and magnify the role Egypt has as a very strong ally to the US and to the West in general. So they don't want to make some compromises on that regard. But also Ethiopia is not also
another important
ally
in the Eastern Africa.
Yeah, in the Eastern Africa,
fighting
the geopolitics.
Terrorists.
Yeah, that contribution is huge. That's very immense as well. You cannot undermine that. So that they want to play a ball.
Bouncing between.
Yeah, they want to play the ball between
but
the two courts.
Giving big share for Egypt in favoring that.
That was what was happening in the Washington talks where Ethiopia walked out, right? So that was a very clear position that the U.S. displayed and turned itself from an observer role to assume the mediator position, which was not the fact. You know, it was there as an observer, but later they demanded to be the mediator against the rules of the game. So that's why Ethiopia has walked out of that particular Washington process. But there seems a little change, particularly recently. You see some sort of change in their position. They were very much interested in mediating the process, which was also pushed strongly during the negotiations in Kinshasa last time. the latest negotiations in Kinshasa, where Egypt and Sudan was trying to bring America, the European Union, and the World Bank as negotiators instead of their current role as observers. And the current senator's visit to Ethiopia also some kind of seems to align very much with Ethiopia's interest of the AU-led negotiations. But certainly there is also some interest related to the humanitarian crisis that we have in Tigray. So they kind of try to play a balance between supporting Ethiopia's position in the African-led negotiation process, while at the same time kind of bringing in some politics and some play in terms
behind
of
the curtain.
Yeah, in terms of pushing Ethiopia to sit with the TPLF leaders. That's the kind of the latest trend that we see recently. But actually, they have been pushing to be in the middle of the table, to lead the negotiation processes that gives Egypt more playground in the Nile hydropolitics.
Okay. Is there any possible room in which the development of the GERD violates international water law?
No.
Is there any possibility?
We have a number of projects.
Put yourself as if you're not Ethiopian. Can you talk that way?
I'm made to be an Ethiopian. I cannot put myself out of that, but I can be logical and neutral.
Just put your mind.
I can be neutral. Yeah, no, because this is not the only project that involved different countries, various countries. Such similar projects have been everywhere in the world. We have a number of transboundary rivers, and we have a number of projects that very much have succeeded well in bringing cooperation than conflict. So this is, and then don't forget that this is a hydroelectric power dam. It's very difficult for Ethiopia actually to utilize the water for irrigation purposes as it stands now, right? Because of the geographic location that the dam is in and various reasons. But we have a number of projects that was implemented, including in Egypt, where countries have tried to change the course of the rivers. They have been transferring the water of the Nile in Egypt and Sudan, particularly in Egypt, outside of its basin to develop the sandy areas in the Sahara, in the Western Sahara. The New Valley Project or the El Salam Project can be a very good example. And this has been in Pakistan, this has been in India, like basin transfer projects have been in India that supported the green industrial revolution, which added a lot to India's advancement as a very strong Asian economic powerhouse, right? In Canada, even in the US, in Lesotho, we can mention a number of other projects where countries have tried to transfer water from one basin to a different basin. You see, so Ethiopia is just saying we are developing a hydroelectric power that would be beneficial not only to Ethiopia, but also to countries in the downstream, in the Nile Basin. So I don't see a very convincing reason why they've been against these projects. Like if you take Sudan, for example, have been supporting. In the beginning years, in the first years of the construction of the dam, Sudan have been very much involved, right, during the al-Bashir time. And later, they've been switching in and out. They were with us, sometimes they were with Egypt, and that also has to do something with the Egypt's stronger hand in the internal affairs, political affairs of Sudan, I would say. So there are a number of pressures on this side, but Ethiopia's project on developing a hydroelectric powerhouse on the GERD is by no means a threat or a problem to any country. It would actually be a prospect for future regional cooperation, a prospect for regional integration, a prospect for regional stability, because developing the Nile, particularly the completion of the GERD, would mean the uplifting of the basin people from darkness uplifting them from sordid poverty, and giving them light and giving them hopes actually to reunite the region, which is very much famous for instability. So I don't see any problem with that.
Okay, what is, the role of African Union in mediating this dispute?
The role of African Union, as I said, as a continental organization that hosts the three countries as member states, have a higher stake in it. The priority of conducting and leading the negotiation process should rest on the hands of the African Union. Okay, unluckily it was not coming from the African Union, but Ethiopia has insisted actually that the African Union should play a major role in bringing the three contesting parties together to resolve their disputes, right, accordingly. So the declaration, the signing of the Declaration of Principles also is part of that particular process where the three heads of state have signed. There's agreement in Sudan, in Khartoum, which was good, and the negotiations were progressively showing good, commending results, right? African Union has invested a lot, and recently, a few days ago, the new head of the union, Mr. Felix from Congo, Kinshasa, has been mentioning the symbolic importance of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam as part of the free trade area that African countries have recently signed to base their cooperations. So the African Union involvement is not only a political involvement, it sees the issue way further from that particular point. It sees from the economic angle, it sees from the angle that it creates kind of strong economic advancement between countries within Africa, because it's a big project, right?
Yeah.
So as a big project, it would result in the creation of jobs, it would result in stability of particularly the Horn of African region, which is very much vulnerable to terrorist attacks, very much vulnerable to drought, desert locust, very much prone to drought, very much prone to all the evils that you can mention on Earth. So in order to address all those issues, this project contributes a lot. So the AU
bringing solidarity.
Yes, bringing solidarity
between
the heads of states, and also encouraging people-to-people interaction. So the African Union-led negotiation is very vital. Ethiopia insisted on it, and whenever, in two occasions, so Egypt and Sudan have tried to take this issue to the United Nations Security Council, which the Security Council actually referred it back to the African Union because, one, it doesn't have the mandate to force individual sovereign countries. It cannot interfere in that. We have a principle of non-interference. But second, and most importantly, the United Nations, as a big multinational organization, believes on the fact that continental organizations have more closer views and more closer ties on the affairs of their member states, and that they should facilitate and support any form of cooperation between them. Okay. So that's very important to note.
Great. 85+% of the Nile water originates from Ethiopia, obviously.
Yeah.
Previously, Sudan and Egypt have developed their own project on the Nile River. And it's for the first time for Ethiopia to develop such a project, right?
Yeah.
Sudan and Egypt, they weren't there to consult anyone while they develop their project on the Nile. But while Ethiopia is starting this project and trying to develop its own project by its own water source, why they complain? Does that sound in any way?
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's not fair. Now, there is no country in the world as well, to add up on your points. There is no country in the world who has brought its unilateral project within its soils.
You got my point, right?
Yeah.
They have developed their own on the Nile
without
River.
consultation.
Without consultation. Yeah, we can mention the Merowe Dam.
Yeah, but we've been consulting them. We have given them the room to come in on a unilateral project that we are investing.
Yeah. While the water is yours.
Yeah, and that has roots in Ethiopia's Ethiopia's principled diplomacy and on the fact that Ethiopia always is concerned on issues.
Logically speaking, Ethiopia wouldn't expect to beg a blessing from Egypt and Sudan to develop this project. But the truth of the matter is political status quo.
Yeah.
So Ethiopia is forced to beg them to agree on their blessing.
Yeah,
It's very funny anyway.
Yeah, yes, it's very interesting. They have been building a number of projects, and they have been, as I said, transferring
They utilize
the Nile
for
out
millennia.
of its basins, but nobody objected that. Like Ethiopia actually was objecting some of that, but they gave deaf ears to that, and they've continued with their projects. And now, interestingly, what's more interesting is when we were building such a project, we have invited them to take part on two bases. One, we've given them an opportunity to evaluate whether or not the construction of the dam wouldn't hamper and affect their rights, wouldn't put their economic and political interests in jeopardy. And second, it was also a room, an invitation to build the dam together and reap the benefits together, which falls within the principle of promoting economic integration and cooperation and peace in the region. But they have been against that.
Yeah.
So it's funny.
It's funny, yeah. Truly funny.
Yeah.
Anyway, some claim that Al-Sisi is, focusing mainly on a GERD to avoid or divert his country's internal political pressure. Do you agree?
Yeah, possible, yeah. Yeah.
In what way?
Nile is the center of Egypt's political attention. It has always been there. A number of Egyptian rulers who've ruled Egypt since the pharaohs have very much used the Nile agenda as a political agenda. And they've always tried to make the issue of Nile an Arab issue. So they wanted now also to go beyond and internalize the issue to attract the interests from the West and the East as much as they can. So yeah, currently there are instabilities. The Egyptian government has internal problems, and number of internal problems as any one of us share, like in also Sudan and Ethiopia. But they wanted to mobilize people around the Nile and cover up their internal political divisions and problems. And that doesn't go anymore. Now we have reached at a stage where the filling of the dam is clear. It will go it will continue as it is planned, and the shift, as I said earlier, the shift from the shift of this water hegemony from Sudan to Ethiopia is very evident. Nothing is going to stop that, but they are trying their best to bring all the supporters of Al-Sisi and the opposition under an agenda, which all Egyptians have been always doing that. We have been seeing rallies, right, in Europe and in the States of Egyptians supporting like the government's position, particularly actually promoting an agenda that pushes their government to be very strong when it comes to the GERD, right? So I would say the Al-Sisi government is using the Nile agenda to conceal the political problems that it has within the state, within Egypt, and bring the attention of all Egyptians, regardless of their political opinions, into one and mount pressure on Ethiopia to force Ethiopia stop the construction of the dam, or particularly in this case to reschedule the second filling.
Okay, Dr. Samuel Tefera, expert on African affairs. Thank you for your precious time and insight. I would like to say thank you very much on behalf of OBN Horn of Africa.
Thank you, Addis, for having me.
A pleasure. Dear viewers, this brings you the end of our edition for today. Bye bye. Have a wonderful time.